Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Liz Bearholtz and really looking forward to this third part in this 4-session series, this mindfulness series of navigating through challenging times. Today, we get to talk about mindset, so we're going to get into that. I am partnering with Prepped with my co-founder here, Ashley, today, and the WiseMind company that we founded is dedicated to creating well work cultures and really developing those human skills that allow us to thrive through challenge and change, helping individuals and teams and even organizations develop these soft skills that can really help us. So just a quick intro. My name is Liz Bearholtz, and I am a co-founder of the WiseMind company. Ashley here is also going to help us with the chat box, so please feel free to engage and be part of the conversation. We find it so much richer as an experience if we can all share our thoughts and our learnings. We like to know where we're going, so today we've had this outline, really understanding to begin with what is mindset and what matters about it, and also to explore our fixed versus our growth mindset, and also cultivating a growth mindset. So how do we go about doing that in service of ourselves? We're going to give you 3 practical tools to help you move through challenge and change. So what is mindset? Well, we love this quote because it really does illustrate the importance of it. But basically what mindset is it's the frame that we see the world through, and it informs our actions and our tendencies and even our behaviors. So I don't know if you've had this experience in these past few months where it's been a lot of uncertainty and a lot of new learning, where you sometimes in moments might feel stuck or paralyzed even, not knowing quite what to do or how to move forward. And yet in these other times, you're able to access a place where you're growing and being creative. Maybe you've picked up some new hobby that surprised you, or you accomplished something that you are surprised that you were able to accomplish. So this is a fascinating way to just reflect on what's been going on in terms of how we see the world. And really, we've been pushed out of our comfort zone, I think, in so many ways right now. But what do we do when we're pushed out of that comfort zone? Dr. Judson Brewer, who's a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist, has this great way of depicting our comfort zone. And in our comfort zone, we're cozy, we feel safe, we know what we're doing, we really are in flow. Sometimes, though, it can stagnate or we can get bored, and we can venture into that learning zone. That learning zone comes with a bit of discomfort, a little bit of our maybe stretch, as we would say, maybe some friction. It can be uncomfortable. Maybe we're taking a risk. So there's also this panic zone. Do we run into that panic zone when we feel the discomfort, or do we run back to that comfy blanket of that comfort zone when we experience stress? So to be able to look at mindset in this way, it's very helpful because it can help us moving through adversity and being able to stay in that place of learning, in that place of progress. We wanted to just check in on this. Okay, we're going to ask a quick question in the poll, and we want you to just write down or vote on what first comes to mind. So you get turned down for a job that you really want. What are you more likely to say to yourself first? So just curious if you can let us know what you think. If we can just put the poll up there. All right, it's up. So let us know, what's the first thing that comes into your head? Is it, why do bad things always happen to me? Or is it, I'll get through this, I can do it? The first thing that comes to your mind. That's Great. We've got a lot of people who can go straight to that place of I'll get through this. I would say that for me, my first thought sometimes, especially in a time of stress, can be that place of why do bad things always happen to me? And this is a great illustration of what can happen in very stressful situations. Our mindset really matters. And we can start to become aware of our mindset. It becomes this lens that we see the world through. So I'm going to go back, to here. Carol Dweck is a researcher from Stanford. She has done a ton of work on mindset and why it matters. She actually believes that it is the way that we view the world. It's the way that we learn. It's how we see things. And she's even taken it as far as saying that our mindset can actually have an impact on our overall success and our overall happiness. But what is it about mindset that can really get us into a place of change? Well, her book called Mindset has these two different places. One is a fixed mindset and one is a growth mindset. So going back to what are fixed and growth mindsets? With a fixed mindset, we actually avoid challenges altogether. It is all about looking smart. We want to make sure that we succeed at all costs. We often will give up easily. And if you think about feedback or constructive criticism, we don't like it. We feel very uncomfortable and we try to avoid it as well. Sometimes in a fixed mindset, we also have this reaction to other people's success where maybe we feel a little bit jealous of them or we feel like they're doing better than us. And so we pull back on our own. This is a place where we can really plateau in a fixed mindset. We get to a place where we're focused on the problem, where the things that are wrong, and it can hold us back. We either get into that panic zone that was in the visual earlier, or we come back and sit in the comfort zone without maybe stretching ourselves. With a growth mindset, it's different. We embrace challenge. We persist in the face of challenge. We see feedback as an opportunity to learn, and we see challenges as a place to sit and work things out. We also might be inspired by other people's success. So it's a little bit of a different way of looking at things that can really have an impact on what we do and how we move forward. What Carol Dweck was so articulate about in her book, though, is that we are on a spectrum with fixed and growth mindset. We have both. And so we might be in a fixed mindset in one situation, and yet we might be in a growth mindset in another. And I'd love you to reflect for a second, what might be your fixed mindset triggers? Is it being in an interview? Is it maybe speaking to somebody in particular? Is it writing a test? What are your fixed mindset triggers? This can be a really helpful way to work through understanding when we're in those mindsets. But why is this? Why do we have these mindsets? Judson Brewer explains it really well. It's all about reward-based learning. So I'm actually going to steal one of his examples because I love chocolate, and this has to do with chocolate. So reward-based learning affects our mindset because it then informs how we behave over time. So for example, a trigger, let's say stress, plus a behavior, so let's use this example, eating chocolate, then delivers this reward. Maybe it makes us feel better. So the trigger, stress, plus the behavior, eating chocolate, gives us this reward of feeling better. We then can walk around our world with these glasses on, these chocolate glasses on. And anytime we're triggered by stress, we've learned through this reward that chocolate makes us feel better. So that's a little bit of a creative way to talk about why we have these mindsets, maybe where they've come from. So we really want to give you some practical ways to go about cultivating a growth mindset, because it can help us move through challenge. It can help us achieve our goals. It can help us focus on working through some learning and staying in that place of learning, that learning zone, without moving back to the comfort zone necessarily all the time, and certainly not panicking and moving into that panic zone where we feel overwhelmed and stuck. The really amazing thing about our brain that neuroscientists have discovered relatively recently is that we can change it. So we have pathways in our brain that are very well worn. So mindsets also that are very well worn in certain situations. The good news is that we can change them, that we have the ability to cultivate a growth mindset through practices. And so what we're going to share with you today are 3. There are many. These are ones that are very accessible to you right away. The first one is awareness. And this quote is beautiful because it does all start with awareness. It shines on things so that they can be transformed. When we are aware of something, we then have the power to change it. If we're never aware of it, we don't have that same luxury. So thinking to yourself, am I in growth or fixed mindset in certain situations can be a little bit tricky. One of the ways we can cultivate this practice of being aware of where we are is our mind-body connection, and understanding that when we are in a fixed mindset, we likely have feelings and sensations and thoughts that go along with that fixed mindset or that growth mindset. So just thinking now, what might those be? What are the thoughts and feelings and sensations when you're in that fixed mindset? They might feel judgmental or closed. It might feel problem focused. These are just interesting places to start, because we know that when we can be aware of the sensations and the feelings and the thoughts, we can have an impact on what we do next. Curious questions. So I absolutely love the practice of using these to access our growth mindset. And it shifts us almost instantaneously, and it can open up possibilities. And the opposite of this idea of being in fixed mindset where we're closed and more protected and running to comfort is the idea that we're open and solution focused. That can be the impact of a really great, powerful, curious question. We'd really love you to experience this. So I'm going to ask you to close down your eyes or just take a soft gaze at the floor, and I'm going to read some questions. And I'd love you to just feel how it feels to hear them. What are the thoughts? What are the feelings? What are the sensations when you hear these questions? What's wrong? Whose fault is it? How can I stay in control? How could I lose? How could I get hurt? Why bother? So noticing what that was like, hearing those questions. Did they feel heavy? Did they feel closed, judgmental? Okay, we're going to have another opportunity. This is a whole other set of questions. So we'll just take a little breath in between and close down your eyes, or take a soft gaze at the floor, and then listening to these questions. What's right? What are my choices? What's important about this? What could I learn? What's the next right step? What's possible? So just noticing how that was or wasn't different from the first set of questions. What we hope you experienced was the difference that a curious question can make. And Dr. Marilee Adams has a wonderful book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. We're also going to give you a resource at the end of the webinar that is a visual for you to help you figure out which path you're on. Are you on the learner growth path, or are you on the fixed judger path with your questions? The reason these questions are so important is that they can act a bit like a GPS. So you ask one question and you get to one place. You ask a different question and you can get to a totally different place. So what are you choosing after you're aware of what mindset you're in? What question are you then choosing to move you into a growth mindset? What's really cool too about these questions is that you don't need to use them all. Even if you take one of these questions away, it can instantaneously in the moment have an impact and shift you from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So if you notice that you're always thinking, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? A great question to have in your back pocket when you notice that thinking or those questions is, what's right? And it completely shifts the direction of the mindset. And it can be really helpful in the moment. Often in work or in job searches, we really feel like we're out of control, but this puts us back in the driver's seat. We can have a choice about where we move. So maybe even thinking about what's one question you want to take away with you today to put in your back pocket in those moments. The next practice is key. So what we know about growth mindset and what Carol Dweck outlines in her book through her research is that our perception of failure is really important in growth mindset. How we see failure impacts our mindset. And one of the ways that we can shift to a place of growth mindset is by focusing on the effort, not the outcome. So with a fixed mindset, we avoid failure at all costs because we believe that our traits are unchangeable. We believe we were born with these traits and that we cannot learn and progress to the extent that we want to, and that our outcome really defines us. So I'm going to give you an example. In school, if you're always told you're an A student, let's say, and you go through your schooling up until university getting A's all the time, okay, and your people around you are constantly saying, oh, you're the A student, you're an A student. That becomes your identity. That becomes the lens that you see the world through. That becomes something you are. So the outcome then is that you're getting A's. You go to university, maybe you sign up for some abstract theoretical mathematics course, and you get in there and you realize, ooh, this is really tough. It's going to be hard to get an A. What her research shows, what Carol Dweck's research shows, is that people then with a fixed mindset on the outcome being the most important piece will drop out of those classes and take an easier class so that they can get that A. That outcome is so important that it defines them. And if they fail, then they themselves believe they are failing. They are a failure. When we focus on effort, we see failure as an opportunity. We stay in that learning zone longer. We stay with the problems longer. Like Albert Einstein says in this beautiful quote, it's not that I'm smart, he said. It's just that I stay with problems longer. And how many of us get frustrated with them? And maybe that is a fixed mindset trigger for some, right? Being in a problem and not being able to work it out. So do we give up, or do we notice that our effort is more important than the ultimate success in the end? There are so many successes that have come from beautiful failures. And I say that in a very loving way. If you think about even incredibly famous people, very accomplished people, Michael Jordan, he didn't make his high school basketball team. He was cut from it. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first news anchor job. And yet their attitudes remained in growth mindset around this idea of failure. Michael Jordan has a beautiful quote that was, I can accept failure. Everybody fails at something. What I cannot accept is not trying. So it's a beautiful way to illustrate growth mindset and the mindset that he had, his attitude towards failure and trying. His focus was totally on the effort. And then mistakes that are made where successes have come from those mistakes, keeping those front of mind. There's a really famous one, Alexander Fleming left all of his Petri dishes out on his lab table when he went away on vacation and came back to see that the mold had killed the bacteria. And then he discovered penicillin and years later won a Nobel Prize for that. So noticing that failures are really these incredible opportunities to learn, and they're on the journey to success, but they have to happen in that learning zone. We have to sometimes take a little bit of a risk and be in that stretch place. Another great way of looking at it is looking at it as a not yet, right? So if we haven't accomplished something, it's not that we can't, it's that we haven't gotten there yet. And there's a school in Chicago that actually gave out that grade. So instead of failing anybody who didn't pass the requisite credits, they gave this grade of not yet. And what they found was that the students were much more likely to continue trying to accomplish their goal. So some really meaningful change in this, and understanding that when we can use these practices to shift from that fixed, closed, protective mindset, maybe even just staying in that comfort zone, using them to shift us into growth mindset, into a place where we're both aware, we're curious, and we're focused on the effort, and understanding that that helps us when we are faced with these challenges. It helps us persevere in the face of uncertainty. So again, this cultivating of our growth mindset is important. We know that we can change our brain. It's like a muscle. When we work at things, when we practice these things, they become stronger and stronger. And what we know from the research too is that in moments where we can be in growth mindset, they benefit us. And with these practices, we can be in growth mindset more and more. They're very simple. They're very powerful. So creating that awareness, what does it feel like in my body when I'm in fixed mindset? What does it feel like in my body in growth mindset? What are the thoughts and the sensations and the feelings that are happening? Getting that awareness and then asking these learner curious questions. Again, there's going to be a handout given where you'll be able to access these questions. You can use it as a guide. Again, like that GPS, plugging in a question to get you to a new destination. And then just remembering all of the incredible people who understood the power of taking risks and not always having the outcome that they wanted. That this is the journey of learning, that it can be uncomfortable. It's that stretch zone. We meet risk, we meet friction, we might even meet failure, but that this is your journey of learning, and taking advantage of that and giving yourself permission to play with that can be very meaningful in both your personal resilience and well-being, and also in your professional resilience and well-being. We love this quote. William Halsey Jr. said it. There are no great people in the world, only great challenges which ordinary people rise to meet. And I really hope you find this inspiring, because we are all human. We all make mistakes. We all address failure, but we can all shift to that growth mindset where we're really acting, behaving, thinking, feeling in service of ourselves. I'm really looking forward to taking some questions. I hope that you have some. And we really are grateful that you came today to invest in yourself. So thank you to Prepped for the opportunity to be here and share with everybody. The choice map is being downloaded, so please feel free to access that anytime. And I'm going to turn it over to Ashley for some questions.
Thanks, Liz. The question little box has disappeared from my screen, but
Oh, no
I would encourage anybody who has any questions about the content here or anything that feels related to this to please put some questions down in the chat and I'll take a look there. There was only one question that I had noticed that had marked, and I hope I'm reflecting this back, although the person's name is escaping me. Oh, here we go. I can see it again. I think when it was downloading the handout, we lost the question box. Here we go. This is from Noel. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. How do you bridge one's cultural background, wherein sometimes our attitudes and behaviors are shaped by our cultural upbringing, and it becomes challenging to shift to having a growth mindset?
What an amazing question. Well, this is one of those situations that we were talking about how our brain starts making connections that can become very rooted. It's like walking through a forest. If you take that path enough, it becomes very well worn and it becomes the easiest route to take. That's how we learn. So coming from different cultural backgrounds, we all experience these different things. And that's why this neuroplasticity, as they call it, the neuroscientists now know we can change our brain, but it doesn't mean that it happens right away. The practices can be very useful in the moment to shift us in the moment, but we have to, it's a muscle. And so if we haven't been brought up in an environment where the mindset is what we're wanting for our future, it requires deliberate, intentional practice. So what a brilliant question. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully these practices are a good start. We're also gonna, the books also that we were talking about are helpful, but Ashley, you're gonna.
Yeah, I wanted to just add something if I can there, because I can really relate to this question. I've experienced that myself in my cultural upbringing. And I think that I just want to acknowledge that it can be harder whether it's our direct family or the community in which we're living, where those external influences can be quite profound, and it can be harder to make these changes because we are impacted by the voices around us, some of us more than others. So just the acknowledgement that and the acknowledgement to ourselves, right? Being compassionate. One of the hallmarks of the fixed mindset is to be very self-judgmental, self-critical. So really interesting to offer ourselves this compassion. So acknowledging that the environment you're in or was raised in, maybe in some ways, whether it's external pressures or expectations or a real focus on end result, like your grades, acknowledging that awareness, that does make it harder, that you're aware of it, and that it might take a little longer to start to unwind and strengthen this other mindset, and really that compassion and that kindness towards yourself. And the other last piece I would say too is it can be really important to find people that you feel, it's almost like even looking at mentors or finding leaders that you either know directly or out in the world, like people you really look up to, whether it's Nelson Mandela or, Oprah Winfrey, or someone who resonates for you, and really starting to keep their language and their energy and their mindset front and center. So those are just a couple other suggestions.
Yeah, and that's,
go ahead. Go ahead. We've got some more questions. So if we can spend a few more minutes on the questions, I think it would be great. One is, how do we keep motivating ourselves and when life is hard and it keeps being hard? I feel like some of what I just said might resonate in terms of that kindness and that patience in the practice, right? And really being gentle with ourselves. But Liz, curious what you might have to add. Oh, I can't hear you.
In this context. So I think that there is that deep importance for self-compassion, because when you think about, I'm going to give you an analogy just because it helps draw a picture a little bit, but when we go through adversity over an extended period of time, it has a huge impact on our well-being. And what I would say is that often when we really feel like we need self-discipline, we actually need self-compassion. And that's a quote that I learned from Ashley. So it's been passed on. But when we have a glitchy computer that's been on and not rebooted for many days or months, and all of a sudden it's freezing and doing all these things, what's the first thing we do? We reboot it, right? And I think that often in the marathon of stress and this constantly on culture, we fail to see how important it is to stop and reboot. What is it that fills you up? And I really believe that is the key to then moving through more of the challenge and persevere through adversity. We have to find ways to rest, recover, energize, reboot. That's my honest answer.
Thank you. Okay, there's a bunch of questions. Why don't we do two more? And then if your question hasn't been answered, as we've been doing previously, we really encourage you to send an email to us and we will respond. We've responded to all the questions, I believe, that came through after the last session, and we will endeavor to turn around and answer quite quickly. So here's the next one. How do you keep a growth mindset when you've been trying to get a job for almost a year and a half with no result? It's hard not to feel like a failure after so long. And this one's slightly different, but I want to share it with you as well, in case there's a way to answer them both. This is specifically around how does one move forward in a certain situation where you've been deemed to never succeed?
Well, firstly, that is so challenging, right? When we are in a position of constant stress, but also having others judging us, or maybe there's rejection as part of it, and moving through that is all about practicing ways in which we can serve ourselves and be well and be resilient, because there's no easy way out of that. And what we know about people who are resilient is that they use a lot of these practices, but it doesn't mean that they're not in a very uncomfortable place. The first step to processing our emotions is actually acknowledging them. So one of those steps could be acknowledging what's going on for you and really being honest with yourself, and maybe with someone who you really trust, or a trusted family member, friend, therapist, even, to acknowledge that, because there are two steps to processing the emotion, and the first one is actually acknowledging them. So I would say that first of all. And secondly, also not pushing it down and pretending it's not happening. The most resilient people acknowledge all those hard feelings. And using some of these practices can be beneficial, but it first starts with that first step.
Thanks, Liz. I enjoyed listening to that answer. It's a nice reminder around, the importance of feeling our feelings. And also, once we do that, sometimes the growth mindset is like a really simple, subtle reframe that might just offer us a bit of reprieve. So for example, I'm reading in the question that you begin to feel like a failure, right? But it's that subtle distinction between, can you reframe that instead of referring to yourself as a failure? Can you acknowledge that in terms of getting the job, that those attempts have failed so far? And that allows us to create that little bit of a distinction, right? Where we're not looking at ourselves as the failure, which tends to really be that fixed mindset, but looking at our scenario. And then that leaves room for the yet, right? That leaves room for the yet piece. The other part about the question where we've been deemed to not succeed, the one thing that came to my mind that if we were in a conversation here, I would love to say is, who has deemed that you won't succeed? And then, really sitting with that and looking at, how do we feel? What's within us? What's our perspective on it? And coming back to that place of defining that for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, so the last question, because I rolled those two in that we'll answer here. I have a hard time. I don't want to let anyone down. I'm just going to go with.
We're always here. Definitely.
Being positive and encouraging is good, but what if I feel desperately down and defeated? How can I reboot my positive mindset and energy?
Could you read the first part one more time?
Yeah, they're acknowledging that being positive and encouraging is good.
Yeah. So
that very human piece, which is there are times that I'm desperately down and defeated. And I wanted to share this question because I imagine many people are nodding, or this is like, we're not alone in this feeling right now. So how can I reboot my positive mindset and my energy? And, I don't know if the first session on the power of positive emotions is up, and there are some little tips and tricks in that session that might be helpful around some of the little habits we can create each day to boost that mindset. Mm-hmm. But Liz, what do you want to share on that?
I want to acknowledge that piece around, positivity being a great thing, and we're told, good vibes only, and we have to be positive and optimistic. And really, the reality is that is unrealistic. We are human. We are human, and we feel all of these emotions. And sometimes it's actually we're not serving ourselves by being, unrealistically positive. Curiosity, I do find, is, if you can think of it in this way, is a realistic optimism. It's just a way, like Ashley was saying, to reframe things a little bit. It's not about being Pollyanna or walking around with rose-colored glasses and pretending everything is fine when it's not. We acknowledge the hard feelings. We know that that's key in resilience. And then folding in some of these pieces of curiosity to just help us through when things get hard, or when we notice we're down or not in a place where we want to be. Sometimes it's okay to be there for a minute or two if that feels good. Sometimes it's okay to stew in not so great emotions, but the piece around awareness is also important. Being aware, is this where I want to be? The answer might be yes, the answer might be no. And if the answer is no, I don't want to be here, you take that awareness and you can implement some of these little mini strategies to move yourself through. So I hope that that's a little bit of a help to start, but I would also recommend just even asking yourself the question you asked me, how can I energize? How can I re-energize? How do you feel re-energized would be the question I would reflect back.
Yeah, I think in those times, it's so critical to do an energy audit. And what I mean just by that is to really start, sometimes we can almost like, the energy can go through the sieve and we have enough of it. It's replenishing when life is kind of in flow and easier, that we don't have to be so aware of the energy expenditure. Other times when life is harder, when we are feeling more defeated or we're feeling down and it's a season of life or it's a moment in time, we really do want it. The energy is very precious. And so really just considering also for yourself, in my day, what might be draining my energy other than my own emotions? And so a very great example right now is the news for some people. So we can't discount, it's not all on us. It's not all internal to us, right? So looking around and saying, where can I conserve some energy? Where can I sort of what's some habits I can start to shift so that my energy that I can hold on to it, because I need it. I need it more now because it's harder to replenish. And I think that can be helpful too.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you, everyone. Such wonderful questions. And they keep coming in, Liz. So okay. I think in the interest of time, we should wrap up here unless,
Yes, just in the interest of time. But having said that, I really encourage you, like we said, we love hearing from you. And so my email is there, but Ashley and I are both accessible there, and feel free to reach out. We're happy to share resources and answer any of your questions going forward. And thank you again for investing in yourself, for being with us today, for sharing and asking your questions. We've had a wonderful time with you. Thank you.
Thanks.